How are you all doing this morning? Hope you feel well rested, unlike me. I've been going to bed fairly late, enjoying all the madness. Yeah, so this is just a talk about kind of AI. Like, I'm very interested in AI and all the current debates around it in terms of the ethics, people getting worried about things like copyright, the technology behind it, and so on. Oh, am I not talking into the mic? Is that better? I can point all these microphones up myself. Yeah, so I'm going to start off by saying a bit about who I am and why I'm doing this talk so that you have a bit of context. And I hope this is interesting. It's always difficult to know like what everyone's background is. It might be that you're all incredibly professional AI people, like you've never heard of it before. So what I'll do is I will kind of start from scratch and just introduce it and say what actually AI is, and then move forward to the main talk. So first of all, who am I? So I'm kind of like coming from this background of being an artist. So I'm not a computer programmer, but I'm looking at it from a sort of like artistic standpoint, I guess. I did a show last night, so I don't know if anyone was there. You know, mainly I love to perform music and visuals, and I do a lot of stuff at the same time. And so to me, AI is a potential way to kind of maybe streamline the process of trying to do all these things myself, and that's how I became interested in it. So, and then the other side is that I'm also a lecturer. I'm interested in kind of things like sound perception and just generally like how humans perceive sound. So that was what I did my PhD on. I'm from the UK, if you've not realized yet. Basically I'm generally super interested in how technology and creativity can sort of come together to create a really interesting output. And so naturally I've become interested in AI and all the things that it can do. And so this talk is called kind of AI as a band member. So I suppose my starting point for all of this was how can it complement creativity as opposed to replacing human creatives? But I think it's a very nuanced debate and there's lots to it. So what I'm going to try to do is look at it from all sort of different angles. So that's the idea. I mean, in terms of some other things that I've done, I'm quite new to this field of AI. I've kind of used this talk as a springboard to force myself to learn more. My background is kind of, I mean, no one's going to read that slide. But if you're interested in the other kind of stuff that I've done, is I've written this book about electronic music performance. I've done various kind of book chapters about performance with tech, visuals, and you know, things like how to make music mixes sound great in terms of like music perception. So that's kind of where I've come from. I've got sort of these two sides of both being a creative and also being interested in technology as well. So that's what led me to kind of looking at this this AI topic, which I think is quite a hot topic right now. Yeah, and what I'm hoping as well is that maybe at the end we can like just have a chat, because I want to know what like people's views are in general. So feel free to just like ask questions or comment or whatever. So this is kind of like just a summary of what I want to look at today. So just first of all, I'm going to do an intro to what AI actually is, which I hope not everyone already knows. So just what actually even is it? What are some subcategories? Like what vaguely goes on beneath the bonnet? I mean, it can obviously get quite complicated, but just as like an overall summary of what the hell is it, what's going on. Some practical applications, like what are the tools that exist right now, mainly in terms of creatives. You know, I'm going to focus on kind of audio and visual applications. So what can it do right now? What are some tools that are available? I'm going to show you some of these tools. Some of them are commercially available and you can play with them. You know, and then I'm going to look at the sort of like, I suppose the more philosophical side of like, what are we looking at here? You know, what does it mean for the future of work? What does it mean in terms of copyright? What are the strengths? What can it offer us? But also, where might there be potential issues? Because it's so new, like even all the people developing this stuff have no idea like where it's going to go. Like it's just developing so rapidly that we need a whole bunch of sort of, oh hi, someone I know is in the room. So there's just a load of discussions to be had basically. And I'm just really interested to kind of be a part of that discussion. So I'm here with an open mind, I guess, and I want to kind of just share with you what I've learned so far, and then, you know, hear your thoughts as well. And we're going to try out some tools as well. Okay, so it will start off a bit more theoretical, and then it will sort of, this is stuck, okay, there we go. And then it will become kind of a bit more practical, and yeah. So I'm going to just start off with like a very kind of hopefully simplified explanation of what AI is. I don't think, you know, that there's even in terms of what the definition of AI is, there's probably various different definitions, but in general it's short for artificial intelligence. And I guess like the main idea behind it is that instead of kind of explicitly coding a computer or machine to do something, so it's not like, okay, step 1, go to the door, step 2, open the door, step 3, pull the chair forward, and step 4, sit on it. It's more like, okay, figure out how to go into the room and sit on the chair. So it's kind of more about having a task and then having machines or computers figure out from experience how to get there. So in a sense, it's kind of like skipping the process of doing it all manually, you know, a very sort of simplified way of explaining it, I suppose. What's interesting is that no one actually really knows what the AIs are doing, so it's kind of like they develop their own little systems of solving these problems, and they kind of build and build and build and build on that, and they kind of take on a bit of a life of their own, which is quite interesting. So computers can be trained to accomplish specific tasks by processing large amounts of data and then recognizing patterns in the data. And in terms of the applications, there's really kind of place for AI everywhere in the world. Like, it helps doctors diagnose patients. I read that there's an AI that can actually tell from photos whether something is kind of like potentially skin cancer or not. So sometimes certain AIs can be better at that than some doctors already. So it can help doctors, it can help pilots fly planes. It can do things like navigation for taxis, you know, city planners predicting traffic. So there's a whole bunch of things. It's kind of got an application everywhere. Today I'm looking mainly at creative applications because I think, I mean, this is quite a creative place. And also I think creativity is really an area where all those debates around the ethics of things come in. So mainly sort of visual and audio applications. And then I'm going to sort of try to look at like potential ways that AI can inform game development or aspects of game development as well. So some definitions, just to kind of summarize. John McCarthy says, it is the science and engineering of making intelligent machines, especially intelligent computer programs. It is related to the similar task of using computers to understand human intelligence, but AI does not have to confine itself to methods that are biologically observable. I mean, the first, you know, if we look back in history, I suppose Alan Turing was trying to figure out tests for whether an AI is truly artificially intelligent or not, which is kind of like asking computers various questions and asking a human various questions, and if you can't tell the difference which one the computer or the human was, then you've got sort of a truly artificially intelligent system. But I mean, it's kind of an interesting discussion because it's a matter of moving goalposts, because the AI becomes more and more powerful. So things that you think it can't do, it suddenly then can do, but then you think of new things again that it can't do. And so it's kind of very difficult to even have a system in place that you can use to test whether something is really intelligent or not. So is it maybe systems that think like humans or act like humans? Like, what does that even mean? Or is it systems that just like think or act rationally, and what does that mean? So even just like what is it is a question that's hard to answer. And we can go a step back, you know, to ask what even is intelligence, which people aren't really clear on. You can define it as goal-oriented learning. So it's not necessarily something that's really a human thing. It's just that humans are really good at it. But it could just be, okay, I need to solve some kind of problem. How do I do it? I need intelligence to do that. So that's one way of looking at it. Some thinkers say it's whatever machines can't do. If that's the case, then AI doesn't exist, basically. It's also, we've got sort of things like intelligence tests to test how intelligent people are, which are traditionally kind of very like mathematical, logical, and then through time people started to say, hey, like someone that's a really good dancer or very good at other things like social skills can be intelligent in a totally different way. So intelligence tests, some people say intelligence is just whatever the current intelligence tests measure. But it's very complex and there's many, many different aspects to it. But one thing that we can maybe agree on is that consciousness is not necessarily the same as intelligence. So something could be really intelligent but not necessarily conscious. I'm not going to try to delve into that whole debate of like, are humans going to be, like, are machines one day going to be conscious and this kind of thing. But there's some really interesting discussions about all of this stuff. Cool. So in terms of what goes on behind the bonnet, I'm going to start off with different types of AI that people sort of distinguish in terms of the definitions. You can look at artificial narrow intelligence. That's basically just a system that is really good at doing one specific task. So it could be just like Google Maps telling you the best way of getting from A to B, but it's not going to help you figure out what you want to eat for dinner because that's not its purpose. So that's what most of the systems do, is that they have one very specific purpose as to what they do. Then you could look at it as a general intelligence, which is kind of more like what we do, where it can do lots and lots of different skills and interlink them, but you know that becomes a lot more complicated to achieve. And then you have sort of the science fiction type super intelligence things where the AI is so clever that it sort of outperforms us at everything and becomes this like robot that's going to take over the world or whatever. So it's really fascinating, but there's this hype cycle where basically whenever we have new technologies that come out, everyone gets very, very excited and thinks, okay, wow, this is going to change the world entirely, like this is going to change everything as we know it, and then we kind of get to this point of disillusionment where it's like, okay, it's done, something is significant, but it isn't necessarily going to change absolutely everything. So this hype cycle is like a good way of looking at it. So for example, if you have product innovations like self-driving cars or personal assistants, you know, they kind of have this typical progress of innovation. So first everyone's over enthusiastic, and then eventually people understand, okay, this is where this sits, this is what we can use it for, you know, so it kind of goes through these stages of like new thing, wow, exciting, maybe not that exciting, but very useful, cool, next thing. So it kind of goes through these stages, and I think we're kind of coming out of this, or we're in this stage of over enthusiasm, or just kind of past it. So right now we've got, I suppose, some really big expectations, and that's why everyone maybe is kind of so excited or stressed out or anxious or whatever it is that people are feeling about AI right now. Just a couple more slides about kind of the technicalities, and then I'm going to sort of move forward to like some demonstrations of what these things can do. You may have heard of terms like machine learning or neural networks. Essentially, in a nutshell, AI is kind of the overarching term. Within that you have machine learning, within that you've got neural networks, and then within that you've got deep learning, which are just various different approaches of getting computers to do stuff, I guess. So machine learning is one of those subsets, and it enables machines to carry out tasks that are non-routine, that require creativity. So that's where these kind of bots come in that are great at things like board games. So AlphaGo is an example of an AI that was able to defeat the best human Go player just because it was very creative. It was doing things that no one had thought of. So it's that creativity aspect that really kind of shines here. or IBM's Watson, so those kinds of things. Yeah, so just really brief summary. Like I said, I'm not a computer scientist, and I'm not going to go into kind of the code behind this or, you know, what people do. But in terms of the rough building blocks, it's the way that it works is that in machine learning, you put in a load of data, and you know, you can label that data. There's also ways of not labeling the data, actually. So essentially you have data, you put it in, and then the computer kind of figures some stuff out from that data. There's supervised machine learning algorithms where the data sets are labeled. So for example, image recognition, I could have loads and loads of photos of phones, and then loads and loads of photos of something that isn't phones. You know, and then the computer can try to figure out what a phone looks like. So you've labeled it, which is good for image recognition. You can also use unsupervised algorithms where, you know, it's more about finding similarities, useful patterns, which is a bit more free. You can have a mix of both. You can have something called reinforcement learning, where you kind of have an iterative approach where you give the computer some feedback and it improves based on that feedback. We can mix them all together, so a lot of systems will use more than one of these things. Some systems are a bit like neurons in a brain, so that's where neural networks come in. And these systems are really good for things like speech or language or image recognition as well. So a neural network essentially has got sort of all these different layers. So you've got an input layer and an output layer, and then in the middle you've got lots of hidden layers, at least one, but normally it's loads and loads of layers. And then it kind of moves through these layers to kind of get to an output. So for example, if I'm trying to figure out if something is a banana or not, then I could just go, okay, is it yellow? Yes or no? Yes, it's yellow. Okay, could still be a banana. Or then I could go, okay, is it shiny and round? Then maybe it's more likely to be a yellow balloon. So it kind of goes through these stages of like figuring out different parameters and therefore assigning weights to these parameters to kind of make a prediction based on the input as to what it could be, for example. Yeah, so that's basically what a neural network does, is that it goes through these layers to kind of arrive at an output, and all of the layers have got different weights. So another example might be trying to figure out what you want to eat for dinner. Do you want to eat pizza or not? So it could be that you're looking at things like cost, how tasty is it, how quick does it take to arrive, how healthy is it, and also how important these different things are to you. So it could be that it's extremely tasty, cheap and quick, and you don't really care that much about whether it's healthy because it tastes great. So it goes through these kind of stages. Just very briefly about kind of image creation, and then I'm going to start to actually show some examples so this doesn't sort of become too dry, I guess. You may have heard of diffusion models. Again, I think I don't want to sort of go too technical on this. But essentially, this all started with people trying to remove noise from images. So when you have a low resolution image, or an image that's very noisy, you know, has got stuff that you want to get rid of, you can go through these processes where you remove sort of the noise and you try to figure out what actually the original image was. But these systems became better and better, and you know, you can actually do this in reverse as well. You can iteratively add noise to images and then look at actually what does the kind of noise look like that you're adding, and then sort of try to reverse engineer this. So right now what happens in diffusion models is that they start from pure noise and then they sort of de-noise the images to try to arrive at the text input that you've put in. Basically the new image isn't kind of like, well, I'm just going to show an example. I think that's easiest. Has anyone here played with MidJourney yet? Okay, not too many people, so this should hopefully be quite interesting. So in terms of what actually happens, I'm just going to use MidJourney as an example. So you can get MidJourney yourself if you wanted to, but I'm just going to show you what it does. So basically it has like a free kind of, sorry, I can't talk whilst doing this at the same time. So it has like a free place, like a starting point where you can do this for free at first, and then after like 1,000 images or something, you then have to basically pay for it. This is some really ridiculous stuff which basically my partner and I have been doing. We just have to generate so many images. This is me mixed with a monkey. Here's an image of some gamers getting excited about a LAN party at MAGFest. I can just put in any kind of font. What do you want me to put in? Just name anything, nothing rude. Any I mean, I don't know.
Flying chicken.
Sorry, flying chicken. Okay. Hold on. And then you can do things like you put in maybe some colors, and you just sort of type this in, and then it thinks about it. I mean, I don't know how quick the Wi-Fi is here, but it basically generates an image. I'll talk about a bit how it does that in a sec, but yeah, it's just quite interesting to see how it works. And this is basically a commercially available tool that can do some really exciting stuff. Yeah, it's very, very slow, which I think, oh, there we go. This chicken looks kind of like a bird of paradise. So it's doing it, and you can kind of like follow how it's denoising the image. You can kind of see how it starts off with something a bit blurry, and it gradually gets to something that looks like really sharp. I mean, that's a nice flying chicken, I think. So it's like magic, isn't it? Like you put something in and out comes some content. Like, here's me mixed with a deep sea fish, because obviously that's the first thing someone would want to search for. Here is a steampunk style Pokemon card. I generally love to combine any sort of steampunk stuff or like retro futurism type stuff with things that don't go with that at all. Yeah, some other playing cards. That's my boyfriend's brother mixed with another. I don't know what it is with us mixing people with monkeys, to be honest. I don't know. We can try one more. For example, I don't know. Let's go for like a cherry cake in the style of Picasso. I'm just making stuff up. And it will generate these images, and then down here you've got options of like up-resing them to like the maximum image resolution. So for example, you really like this chicken here, so you can up-res it. You can also create more variations. And yeah, like this is literally, it sits on Discord, and it's free, and you can just literally start using it. There's just restrictions in terms of the amount of stuff you can generate. Where it gets really interesting, and I'm going to get to this point, is copyright. You know, like when you pay for the full version, you kind of own the images, so you can use them. But yeah, there's a bit of a debate behind that. So we've got a cherry cake in the style of Picasso here, just as an example. So this tool generates still images. There's also tools that generate things like 3D graphics. Here's a banana reading a book. Or we've got, I don't know, sorts of like random stuff that people have come up with. So in terms of the games industry, I guess having things that you can actually use as a 3D object can be more useful than having a still image, though still images can also be great for things like maybe textures or concept art and that kind of thing. So we could have a squirrel wearing a kimono playing the saxophone. This is Dream Fusion, so this is a 3D tool. And another tool that I've played with is Runway. So Runway is a video tool. So it's like kind of like a video editor using AI. And I actually used this to make a music visualizer. Let me see if I can show it. So I'm going to just play a little bit of this, maybe like the first minute or something. I hope the sound works. It doesn't. So maybe I need to turn it up on there. Let me play with that for a sec. That's up. I don't know if anyone here knows like how this works. Wait, what's plugged in where? I don't know. You can watch the video if you want to hear music, but oh god, I don't know. So I suppose it's going here, then it's going. It seems to be like it should be working, so I'm not really sure. Am I hearing it?
Check that your Mac audio is typing it to...
Yeah. Where's audio? I'm blind. Here's sound. Yeah, should be fine. Yeah.
It's the headset.
Oh, that's the screen though. Like I want to. There's a cable here that goes into the mixer, so it's going to play it out with that little projector. But you can hear it. It works. It can work. Yeah, so it's quiet, but I hope you get the idea. So to arrive at this outcome, I generated in MidJourney a whole bunch of kind of galaxies and utopias and things like that. And then I used this other tool called Runway in order to merge them together into a video. So Runway has got a whole bunch of really interesting AI-powered tools, and one that I really like is this frame interpolation tool. So what you can do is you can put in a few images, you know, the more related they are, the better, like, and then it will try to morph between them. So I can say, okay, I've got these three, I want my clip to be this length, and then I can generate it. And again, it's free. If I want to have higher resolution versions of this stuff, then I can pay for it and get that as well. But if you want to play with this stuff, it is available, and it's really not that complicated. So I've just put in those images, and now it's trying to think about how to get from one image to the other. So the places, I mean, it kind of looks like a droopy watercolor painting. I think where it performs really, really well is if the individual images are actually part of something that could be a sequence. So say if you've got like a kid jumping on a trampoline, and it's here, and then it's here, and then it's here, or she or he, then it can think about, okay, to get from here to there, like it needs to move that way. Whereas if it's two entirely different images, it might look a bit more like this, basically. Yeah, so that's Runway, and it's got these AI magic tools. You know, it's got tons of things. Like this only came out like a few months ago. I think in November, early November, I think. The AI frame interpolation thing came out, not the overall tool, but frame interpolation was new. But it's constantly adding things like replacing parts of an image, you know, changing the backdrop, and it's just like, it's crazy what it can do, really. It's got the normal kind of video editor in it as well, so you can edit videos in it, and you can kind of add these other things in addition. Well, on the note of kind of showing tools, I'm just going to keep going and show a few others. This is a chatbot which can automatically tell me some text. Help, I forgot my... Say something interesting about AI. Right, so, oh, that's great. Let me just maybe reload this. Okay, I don't know. I'm going to put in something shorter. Tell me about tomatoes. Tomatoes are a popular fruit that is widely consumed around the world. They're a good source of vitamins and minerals. So this is a totally new text that it's coming up with on the fly. I could also use it to generate stories. So for example, tell me a story about Bob the squirrel who likes to skateboard. Sure, here's a short story about Bob the squirrel. Bob the squirrel was a curious and energetic little animal. He lived in a small tree house in the forest where he spent most of his days exploring and playing. One of his favorite activities was skateboarding. I mean, it goes on and on. We've got a whole story here. And it's just literally writing it for me. I'm a university lecturer, so I'm a bit worried about how my students are going to go about their essays going forward. Yeah, but I mean, you can see from these examples that there's some really crazy AI capabilities coming up, and that it's just, you know, it's bound to kind of change something about the way we create and about the way that we think, and that it raises a lot of very interesting questions. Yeah, so this is OpenAI's chat bot. You know, so we've looked at videos, we've looked at kind of video editing, photos, as well as chatting. I want to show you a music example as well. So there are AIs for generating music as well. So in terms of the AI being another band member in the more literal sense, I suppose, that's where that comes in. Let me just see on here somewhere. Oh, here I think, yeah. So Harmon AI is a tool where you can generate music based on inputs or samples based on inputs. I mean, there's lots of other things people do as well. No, I'm trying to find some examples. Had them earlier, no, I don't know. Maybe if I click on, that's just like a general discussion. One sec, I'm going to check out where I can find this music stuff. Which tab it was in. Oh, here's a demo, okay. This is someone just creating some music with AI. I mean, I don't know what I'm listening to. It's a problem of having the projector. I mean, it's more like noises, maybe not the... This is an old song I made, Whammon. I mean, there's also some new tools that are sampling popular songs and trying to create new popular songs, and it's really interesting because they're normally in English, but it sounds like English would sound to a foreigner that can't speak English. It's basically like this weird gibberish sort of non-English that comes out. But I mean, this is just where we are now. It's gonna most certainly develop more. There's also, so these are some commercially available tools that are kind of open source or available to people. And there's also a whole bunch of people that create their own tools just for their own use. For example, Holly Herndon has got, just see if I can find this. So Holly Herndon is a producer and artist who does some really cool stuff with AI, and she's written or she's created a tool which allows anyone to sing into a microphone, but it comes out as her voice. So I hope it can translate from this little projector we've got there.
When you stay for
And of course, I'm watching some ads. I'm just going to go to the bit where she demonstrates that. So, I mean, you can watch it in your own time as well, I guess, because of the sound situation we've got. But essentially the guy over here is going to sing through the microphone, and with the power of Holly Plus, he's going to basically sound like Holly Herndon.
With Doctor Labs. Take it away, Bert.
It gets so murky.
Yeah, that's his normal voice.
Loving what you know, but I keep on swimming. I'm swimming further up the road. See, the problem is I don't know what to say when you come around acting this way. But yes, the truth is I show you every day.
Cause you love to stay.
Yeah, so it's pretty impressive. And in this case, it really truly is another band member. Yeah, so in terms of how does this actually work behind the bonnet, as an example, in terms of image creation, diffusion models are quite popular at the moment. Does this work? Yes. So basically, they were originally designed to remove noise from images. That's kind of where they jumped to the different demonstrations. The thing that's really interesting is that it's not really kind of copying stuff from existing images, but it's more like generating, I guess, trying to simplify it, is trying to create a system of the different features that specific things have. So, for instance, if I talk about the banana example I had earlier, so there are different metrics like color. So the banana is yellow. Normally it can also be brown or green, but usually it's yellow. Roundness, again, like it tends to be sort of long, but you can also have a banana slice, in which case it's a circle. So each of these parameters kind of have likelihoods as to whether it's a banana. So it can be not yellow and round and still be a banana, but it's less likely to be one. And things like shininess, but as you're training these algorithms with a ton of input data of banana images, it starts to also come up with things that don't actually even make sense to humans. So it could be different image parameters that are completely nonsensical to us, but that make sense to a computer. So it goes through thousands of rounds, and through this deep learning, it constructs something called a latent space, which is kind of like a space with lots of dimensions, and all the dimensions are these parameters, which there are like over 500 of. So what essentially happens, it kind of starts with noise. It removes noise, more noise, and then checks the output against kind of this image recognition models of does the output actually look like something that makes sense to humans. I mean, of course, in practice, it's a bit more complicated than that. But I think the takeaway point is it gets the image data from existing images, and then it tries to construct new images based on features that it's found in the existing ones. So the kind of things, the kind of problems that might occur, already start to surface. It's like, where does it get the original images from? And that's where some of the debates around this are happening. But before I move on to these various debates, I just want to see that I've covered everything. So these are the sort of commercially available art tools. I think I've covered a good range of them. There's a few more, and I was just kind of text on a slide, but like you've got tools for images, you've got tools for 3D, tools for video, for example, and I've shown you a few. There's a whole bunch of audio tools, which is interesting for me because I'm more of a music producer / audio person. So there's a ton of audio tools, and they all do, there's this thing of like specialized applications, I guess. Each of them is very good at one very specific thing. So for example, some of them are specialized for voice or speech synthesis, creating believable voices. Then there's ones for sound, more musical sound synthesis. There are tools for songwriting. Splice is a platform where you can download samples, and they've got an AI-powered sample selection thing that helps you find the samples that you want. And then music production more generally as well is kind of possible. I don't know how many people here sort of produce music or are familiar with things that happen in music production, but what people do when they produce music is they do something called mixing, which is where you take all the instruments and you sort of balance them. You make some louder, some quieter, you change sort of like how much bass or high frequency something's got, for example. I mean, it's a very simplified way of explaining mixing, and there's tools by Isotope that allow you to mix music. There's also one called Lander, that's more for mastering, which is something you do to a finished stereo audio file to just make it sound better, to make it like, I don't know, bang or whatever you want to call it. So that's called mastering, and there's tools for that as well. So having seen all this wealth of stuff, like it's really quite crazy. When you're following it, I'm sure that in just a few weeks from now, you're already going to have something new and really powerful that doesn't even exist right now. Because once you kickstart this process and you give the AI a task, they can just keep going and they keep training themselves. So with things like MidJourney, I'm kind of like, by putting in prompts myself, I'm making it better by doing that. So it's almost like it takes on a little bit of a life of its own, and it just moves forward. So I'm going to talk about kind of the debates that I mentioned a little bit, and I'm going to start off with negative things and then move on to positive things. I want to kind of, I suppose, offer like an unbiased view. I think it's the same in my personal opinion, which I don't know how relevant my opinion is, but I think AI is kind of a tool like any tool, and a tool in itself isn't good or bad. It's like, is a knife good or bad? Like, you could use a knife to kill someone, or you could cut a bread into slices and feed your family. So the knife itself doesn't necessarily have a good or bad identity, but it's how do you use it. And so because it is so new, I guess, we don't have regulations or ideas about what to actually do with this. And so obviously there's cases that end up annoying people. What happens, I think I'm going to actually start with the copyright side of things, this slide here. So this is an example of it being pretty problematic. So what happened with MidJourney is that it was originally based on a kind of open source research project where, in terms of the copyright, you can literally mine all the images on the internet, and you can use alt text from the images to learn and to train it, which is really good, because in order to learn how this stuff can work, and in order to build believable modules, the more data you've got, the better. But what it also means is that everything can be used to train these AIs, and so some artists have gotten a bit annoyed with that. Understandably, because if I put into this MidJourney, I can put in, generate me an image in the style of this specific artist, and the artist might not have agreed that they want to have their work be used in that way. So I think there's a big difference between like generating like the chicken, because it's kind of like no one owns the chicken as a shape, kind of as their copyright. But then if I generate images specifically in the style of someone, that's when it can become complicated. So I'm sure you've seen this image of the Afghan girl before, which is really, really famous a while back. It was this photo became really, really famous. And the thing is, like, because it's so famous, there's lots of in Google Images, if you look up Afghan girl, you're going to get tons and tons of this image. So like, the AI doesn't know that that's not what every Afghan girl looks like. It will just think, okay, this is what an Afghan girl looks like. So it will put out, an image that's very similar again. So this is the problem, is that you can have input data which may be copyright protected, and then it will come out on the other side resembling too much that original input. But it is a really, really nuanced debate. Like in music, in terms of music production, you've got people that are called forensic musicologists, which are supposed to, like their whole job is to try and figure out whether someone has infringed someone else's copyright. Because it's really, really complicated. So it's like, how similar is the song to another song? But if I make a 4/4 techno kick drum beat, like boom, 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 it's like, can someone sue me because I've like infringed David Guetta? Like probably not, because it's so generic that everyone does it, right? So there's kind of several parameters to this. There's like, how similar is it? But also, how generic is it? And it's not something that even with existing copyright law, anyone has even kind of completely figured out. So it's already complicated. Now you're kind of making it even more complicated by having this AI stuff going on. I mean, arguably, there's some thinkers like Austin Kleon has written this bestseller. It's called Great Artists Steal. Like every artist or every person creating is essentially getting inspired by lots of things that already exist and then plotting out something new that doesn't exist yet, but it's kind of just a mixture or remix of existing things. Similar, Ferguson says everything is a remix. So if there really is a debate to be had here, I think if I put in, I want to have images in the style of this person that exists, it's fairly clear that that's a bit unfair to the original artist. But then on the other hand, no art that we create is really truly original. So there's like a gradient, I guess, from where it's okay and really great and where it's not okay. So that's one thing. I've only got 10 more minutes, so I'm going to just speed through the rest of this. That's one potential problem. Another potential problem is the input data. So with an AI in general, you give it a task and it will do the task as well as it can. Like there's this funny example of, I think it's a staple factory where you tell, like it's an imaginary example where you say, your task is to create as many staples as you possibly can, and the AI goes away and cuts down all of the forests and kills all the humans, and in the end the entire world is just a massive staple factory. Because it doesn't, like it literally only does what you tell it and it uses the data you put in. So in a sense, in that way, it's actually pretty dumb, right? Like it just uses whatever it can get its kind of virtual hands on. So similarly with, some of these tools, there's some questionable data that might go into it. So if I've got an image generation tool that just uses all of the images on Google Images, then there could be some really dodgy images that end up going into that, which as a creator at the end that you're putting in this prompt, you might not even know where that comes from, there's some, in the past, YouTube was recommending kind of conspiracy theory content because it did really well in terms of views. So they had to tweak that. And Amazon had a hiring algorithm once where they tried to automatically figure out who does well for a certain job. And they were looking at existing like CEOs and existing really amazing business people who were all men. So it actually discarded all female applicants, like just based on that input data. And it's not that they wanted to do that, like they just, this is the problem, like essentially all the bias that exist in the real world are going to get baked into the AI. So things like problems can occur, and so that just shows the complexity of this. The big one is the sort of threat of unemployment. I read this book recently by Daniel Zuskin, who's an economist, talking about, it's called A World Without Work, and I thought it was super interesting. We can see in terms of the art space, it's a little bit scary to think that, if I can generate these amazing images so quickly just using AI, why would I pay for an artist? So a lot of artists clearly are getting scared about that. So there's a problem. However, that problem isn't new. I'm going to just skip to this slide. And what's that got to do with horses? So the problem of automation anxiety is not a new one. It's at the forefront of the discussion now, but it's not a new one. 10 minutes left, okay. So it's a term that's a bit older. So machines have taken over jobs, forever really. So in 1915 there were 21 million horses in America. There were no cars, and nowadays we only have 2 million horses here because we've got cars, we don't need the horses. So this is kind of an example a lot of people use to showcase what automation does. As soon as I've got a better system in place, the previous humans or horses are no longer needed and may become unemployed. Someone called William Lee built this automatic weaving machine that was really great. Like, it could automatically weave fabrics, and it was rejected by Queen Elizabeth on the basis, I think I put the wrong year in. I think it's quite, sorry about that. So it's not this year, it's a different year, much longer ago. It was rejected on the basis that it could render people unemployed. There's a lot of other things. James Hargreaves made like a spinning jenny, and then a mob smashed his house to bits because they were really scared that he was going to replace all of their jobs with a machine. So this is not a new debate, it's an ongoing debate. And if anyone wants to know about employment and AI, I really recommend this World Without Work book, because it's super interesting. And it goes into a lot of detail that I don't have time to cover. But I just want to talk just really quickly about the strengths of AI, because I've said a lot of more negative things. But the things I think that it's good at is essentially it can also be a complementing force for creativity. So that's why I'm talking about it as a kind of band member, which I guess it's the type of language I would use because I'm a musician. But it can be applied to other creative fields as well. So rather than thinking of it, it's going to replace me, it could also complement me. So a friend of mine, Francesca Rosella, she's a fashion designer. And she's written a really cool blog about this, where she says it's just really great for creative brainstorming. Like, she can design clothes, she's very good at it. But she might go, oh, actually, I wonder what it looks like if I combine this style with this style. I'm going to just rush through this, don't worry about reading everything off the slide. But she's saying that actually it doesn't, you can't be, it doesn't replace you as a creative, but actually it still requires really knowledgeable creatives to use the AI well. Like she says in the blog, if you just create a green Christmas elf, what's the point? The really interesting side of things like MidJourney is to combine art styles of artists through history, centuries back, ideas that are really, really old, and to synthesize them into new ideas and then use that as a springboard for your own creativity. So you need that knowledge of existing styles, and in a way it's a great way to interact with art history. So more people might become interested in playing with this stuff and mixing it, matching it to see what could come out of this. I'm going to skip that. So in a way the currency of the future is probably ideas, as opposed to maybe technical art skills as they are today. I'm not saying that it's not going to happen tomorrow, but at some point. I've said that already. Yeah, so art is something we create, but then also something that we might explore. And just think about who is the artist in general is a complex question, because we are so inspired by other existing artists. When photography first came out, people said, you're just taking a picture of something that already exists, so you've kind of stolen the image. But we know photography actually takes a lot of skill to do well. So I think it's likely that with AI we're going to see something a bit similar, where it's not going to just take away all artists, but actually it just is a different way of interacting with art. Maybe the art is in creating great prompts, And I personally think it's kind of cool to collaborate with this alien other, and having this visualizer was really fun for me. I don't feel like I've created, I feel like I've collaborated with something to make it. I'm going to wrap up here. These are just my thoughts. Please do ask questions or let me know your thoughts or comments. We've got, I think, 4 minutes or something. I think yours was first.
So where do you think, as a musician, where in the creative process do you think AI is most effective in music making? You talked about like the visualizers being helpful, but in the actual like composition, is it evaluation? Like your experience?
Yeah, I think it really depends on the creative process. I think one thing that I'm seeing a lot of is that many modern music tools, especially for mixing, are based on hardware tools that no longer exist. So if you want to make something sound fat, then you can use something called a compressor, which has got buttons that are very based on bygone tools, but it's not something that necessarily someone will understand. So if I'm a great violin player and I just want to create a recording and I want to mix it, but I don't know how to mix, I only know how to play, so then it kind of is a really good way to kind of complement that. So I think mixing is a really good place for it. I guess it's similar to when you have in photography, when you have automatic red eye correction or auto contrast, for people that don't necessarily know how to do that with Photoshop. So it can improve, I suppose, the quality of the overall sound. I mean, you can use it for anything. Like the side that I, as a creative, like a bit less is people automatically generating music rather than, hiring a composer. But it can do that as well. I think it really depends on the application. But I think the thing I find most interesting is probably automatic mixing. Yeah. Sorry, who was next? Yes, go for it.
Yeah. So something that's important to think about is like the visual and auditory and chatbots, and it's really only the most visual way for humans to understand and affect AI. Actually, AI algorithms have already been operational on the internet for many years.
Yeah.
The YouTube algorithm, and it can be argued that because the YouTube algorithm is funding everybody on YouTube, all of the content on YouTube is AI funded and essentially AI. Like people are trying to, they're working for this manager's algorithm. Is AI generated content, even though human made it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah.
That's both levels. Like the top level creativity, creating reaction videos that get your eyeballs. You gotta have an arrow pointing to something.
That's a really good point.
The algorithm decided that.
Yeah. It's almost like the other way around from like MidJourney. It's like that the algorithm tells me what to create, so it's almost like reversed. Yeah, it's a really good point. I like that. Cool. Yes?
Yeah, I guess I have a couple questions. First one would be, what's the most interesting generative audio thing you've found so far? And I guess the second broader question would be, what do you think of the potential down the line issue of future generative models consuming too much training data from AI generated data sets basically as they get employed more professionally?
Yeah, so the first question, I think, what's the most interesting kind of algorithm I've come across? I mean, I don't know, for me personally, I think the Holly Herndon stuff is super fascinating, just because it's, what she kind of said, I did an interview with her and she said kind of it's really interesting to talk to yourself. I think language generation in general is super fascinating. She's saying she's hoping to be able to have a conversation with herself one day to understand herself better, which I guess goes beyond just kind of music or audio generation. It goes into this philosophical thing of understanding your own self in a different way. So I think those kinds of applications are really interesting. I would love to, right now I'd have to have loads and loads of data, but I would love to train an AI myself to create music in my own style, in a way. I think that would be fascinating. And the second question, I'm not sure if I understood it, so you said what's the problem with when you have data, too much data going in, and then the data is based on itself?
Kind of the feedback loop where now we have all these generative models that people are putting generated audio or visual data up from that. And then in turn, future models may ingest that.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Kind of have a feedback loop. What do you think of that potential future issue?
Yeah, I think that's super fascinating. It's hard to say what will happen because Yeah, so future outputs are based on not human inputs, but previous AI outputs. So it's gonna maybe shift what art or music are all about, isn't it? Like, it's impossible to say, because I think also our tastes and our overall culture might change as a result of it. So whilst we can give it feedback and say, I like this image or I don't like this one, I think our tastes are going to shift, and it's probably, I don't know, I mean, it's really hard to say what the outcomes of that would be, other than it's interesting. I've just been shown a sign to wrap up, so unfortunately, I don't think I can answer more questions, but I'm going to hang around here for a few minutes. But yeah, thank you for listening.